Facebook Live right now, and we'll come on here. I'll do a brief introduction and of what the show is and such, Steve, and go on from there. But yeah, and I mean, you'll know here in a second. Orlando Pace was on too. Okay, get Dan Marino on tomorrow. Write that down. Taking away my.
But is that the reason you had to let it go? That you got suspicion? I think it's a little bit of suspicion there. I think guys all feel that way. Marshall's been very vocal about it. He's been very vocal. Yeah. Right. And I know we, in our red zone, our preparation in red
let's
zone.
do this.
Videotape.
I don't know if you can hear
down there, and they had
what we have on in the background there, but yeah.
Well, the NBA, we do know Blake Griffin is not going to make his debut tonight in Detroit. Stan Van Gundy telling the media.
So you'll know when the music comes on and all this will be able to
looking to snap there against the Cavs. NBC Sports Radio.
Well, Dan Marino on Dan Patrick tomorrow. I'm going to have to be sure to listen to that, as I know you will as well. Hey, everybody, this is Marky Billson, your voice of choice for a new generation of Tri-Cities sports fans. The name of the program, Tri-Cities Sports Now, on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities, and we own the Tri-Cities because we have the best guests, the hardest-hitting opinions. We will tackle the issues people are afraid to hit, and we're going to do that today. On today's program at 1:30, Johnny Lynch, mayor of Unicoi, Tennessee. What's going on with the Buffalo Valley Golf Course? Is it going to be a golf course? Are they going to turn it into a soccer complex? What's on the plan? That's been huge local sports story, the mayor of Unicoi, where the golf course is actually located. And now Unicoi is maintaining the potential sale of the property. Well, he'll be on at 1:30. 1 o'clock, Steve Forbes, head coach of the East Tennessee State men's basketball team. They come off a surprisingly close 73-71 victory against the Citadel Bulldogs last night. Bulldogs 7-14. ETSU began the day ranked 58th in RPI. They're now 19-4, third longest winning streak in the nation. But they couldn't hit a three, only 2 of 23. And so the Bulldogs, who are no longer playing quite that loot and shoot style that Duggar Belcom, the former Tusculum coach, had implemented, what with the departure of Preston Parks, they're now averaging about 20 fewer shots a game than what they were at the start of the year. And so the score isn't that high, but still the Citadel, they were able to make 11 of 28 three-pointers. It's not that great. ETSU only made 2 out of 23, but still were able to hold on at the end and win the ball game. But to begin with, I'm going to have on an old friend here, and he joins me right now. You know, usually we have Marky's monologue, but Steve Peters is a co-host of the Beating Drum radio show, which is a radio program that you'll be able to find out, or should I say a podcast, on Facebook. I just recommend everybody follow Peter's podcast and all. It is in defense, and he feels that Native American imagery in sports teams, be they the Dobyns-Bennett Indians or the Washington Redskins, honor Native American people. And, of course, the big news yesterday, this will be the last season in which the Cleveland Indians will be using their iconic logo, Chief Wahoo, on their uniform. And so, Steve, I got a tweet from him right before the show, and I wanted to talk to him anyway. He reached out. Steve, it's a delight to talk to you again. And just when the news came out on this show, actually, around 1:30 yesterday, that the Indians were going to, although they will still sell merchandise with the logo, T-shirts and the like, they will no longer wear it after this season. What were your thoughts?
Well, I appreciate you having me back on. Fantastic to be on with you again. Currently right now I'm not co-hosting the podcast show anymore, but I'm still affiliated with the show. So if you guys head to Facebook or Twitter and you look up the show, it's called The Beating Drum, DEATING. You can find all kinds of podcasts that I do for talking about this issue. I did a video yesterday for like
lot of people, they'll look at this and say, hey, it's just a baseball logo. Now, in my opinion, I think that this is witch hunting. And I've felt this for a long time. I've felt that the attacks on Native American imagery in sports, you're trying to find hate where it doesn't exist. And this, to me, is far more prejudicial than the other side. I had actually written a commentary out, and I think I will put it on Medium and on our 1420 NBC Sports Radio website. But I wanted to talk to you to begin the show here, Steve, to begin with here. And I'm reminded of an old WKRP episode in which there was an evangelist that would come on and said that the music that was being played on WKRP had questionable lyrics. And Dr. Johnny Fever once said, what are these people doing? Waiting in the dark, waiting to listen to these songs, saying, there's a naughty word. And I almost feel it's the same way here. I mean, these people going through sports pages saying, there's a naughty nickname. We don't like that. Well, you can root for another team if that's what you care for. I know that this has come about, the commissioner of baseball, Rob Manfred, he was no fan. He led a lot of the charge here. The Indians were going to host the All-Star game. Cleveland will in 2019. And so the mandate was basically get it off your uniforms because we're going to have the All-Star game. Thought there, is this, in your idea, again, witch hunting? Is this bullying? To me, this is, just abuse of power. What are your thoughts?
There's a better word for it, and it's extortion. Because the reports had come out early on when Rob Manfred came into Major League Baseball as a commissioner that one of his first priorities was to take down the Cleveland Indians. And I've been pretty vocal about this, that he made that his priority, was he was going to somehow go after the Cleveland Indians. He's only been commissioner for a couple years, and that's what he's pretty much focused on. My opinion, he's a terrible commissioner. He has done nothing to advance the sport of baseball. He's actually made it worse and more unenjoyable. And when Cleveland was given the All-Star game, it came with a price. You'll get this, but I want you to give up this. And if you don't, I'm going to take that away from you. And then they said, well, the commissioner never said that. But there is reporting coming out, and I read this on Yahoo yesterday, that the commissioner is quoted as saying, if you get this All-Star game, the Chief Wahoo logo needs to be gone by 2019. Because he's afraid of protests happening outside of Progressive Field, and he doesn't want it to be in the public spotlight. The problem with that, and I don't understand why the Dolans don't see this, is that that's not a fair practice.
Yeah.
Why would you accept an All-Star game and have to give up something that is so iconic and so pivotal to your history as a franchise? Why would you upset your fan base and lose so much money in revenue that they're going to lose by this, all for an All-Star game that will only happen one time, and that's it?
Well,
Makes no sense.
Steve Peters, I wanted to say, one of the things that I was looking at is that we've talked about this, and it's the financial gains that the protesters often receive. And I found this story via Associated Press, via the ABC News. But Robert Roach of Cleveland was indicted earlier on account of conspiracy to steal federal funds and 2 counts of thefts from programs receiving federal funds. He's been a critic of Chief Wahoo, of Washington Redskins, of the Catawba Indians, for that matter, I'm sure. Right. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Cleveland says a lengthy investigation showed that Roach conspired to divert money from the American Indian Education Center in suburban Cleveland, where he served as an executive director. Prosecutors say Roach and a consultant embezzled at least $180,000 from substance abuse and mental health services administration grants, and that Roach himself diverted $77,000 for his personal use. And the idea here is that, well, maybe you can't paint a broad brush and assume all activists are literally stealing money, but with Roach and Zach Reed as the main opponents of Native American imagery, can we deduce that money and attention have been behind this fight forever? What say you, Steve?
Absolutely. And it's funny because for the listeners who don't know, Robert, I don't know how you exactly say his last name, Roche, Roca, whatever. If you guys think back a few years ago, there was an image of a Native American man facing off with a guy who, at opening day at Progressive Field, his face was painted up and he was wearing this Chief Wahoo shirt. He had a feather headband on, and there was this image. That picture went kind of viral. Well, that Native American guy is this Robert Roche guy, and he actually was on our show around Christmas time last year, so that would have been 2016. He came on the show, talked with the two hosts that we had on the show at the time. I actually wasn't hosting that show that day, and he was basically laying out his argument against the Cleveland Indians and why it's harmful to children and why people are, suffering in poverty because of the Cleveland Indians. He made this grand spectacle of how the Indians are just so horrible and so hateful. Well, he claims, and what he told us, you can Google me, you'll find all kinds of, information on me about how I'm leading the campaign against us. Well, we Googled him when we did some research, and we found out exactly what you just told, that he's under investigation. He's been indicted on 2 counts of embezzlement and misappropriation of government funds. What they also didn't tell you is that he's also been arrested for domestic assault and battery of a woman. So here we have a guy who's talking about a cartoon drawing, how it's harmful to kids and it's hurting Native Americans, yet he's going around misappropriating government funds and beating up women and going to jail and getting arrested for assault and battery. So he's a real great person to be leading this campaign, if you ask me.
I remember and there's a video out there, and yes, it's a guy with his face painted who meets Roche and all this. And although the imagery has often been used against the Indians, or really the entire debate and such here, Steve Peters, what I would say is that here's a guy in Roche who immediately begins insulting. Look at these people, they're drunks. He basically insults the fan with his face painted, who has the famous line of, hey, we're honoring you here, and
right.
And it's like, I'm not hating you at all, and yes, you are. And to me, and I was always brought up to believe that, but I think everybody else is, telling you what you think. It's one thing to comment, but what you're thinking, Steve, I'm going to tell you what you're thinking. That's the most offensive thing that is imaginable to me. I'm going to tell you what you think. And, I know of no one who reads minds, but evidently Roche and some of his allies believe this. Now, the Indians are saying that, okay, we're going to take it off off the stadium, we're going to take it off the uniform following this season, but we will still sell, caps, t-shirts, and all this because it is iconic. It's been part of our brand for 70 years, and we don't want to totally disassociate ourselves with us. Is that a worthy compromise for you, Steve?
No, because here is the from a legal standpoint, just in business, they had to maintain some presence of Chief Wahoo, because if they completely cut ties printing anything Chief Wahoo and they are disassociated with this logo as a team, legally they will lose the trademark on the Chief Wahoo because they are no longer printing its image. Mm-hmm. So the trademark becomes invalid, which means that anybody now can print shirts, create hats with the Chief Wahoo logo on it, and make money off of it, and there's nothing that the Cleveland Indians can do to stop it because they no longer have the registered trademark. So by keeping just a few things on the shelf and saying, we still own the trademark to this, they have basically put the kibosh on anybody stepping in and taking the logo away from them. And I was watching MLB.com last night with Brian Kinney and all of his little chickenhead friends, and they were saying, no one's going to care that Chief Wahoo's gone in 5 years. Cleveland fans will eat up the Block C logo. They'll be just as happy with that as they will with the Chief Wahoo. And that's not true. And you're right that they're not going to sell any of the Chief Wahoo gear within Progressive Field. They're not going to have it on MLB.com, and it won't be on the Indians' website. It's going to be in 2 places. One store in an outlet mall in Northeast Ohio, and at the Goodyear facility down in Goodyear, Arizona. And I guarantee you, what Wahoo merchandise they will have on the shelves will be limited very uninspiring. They're not going to invest money into creating grand designs with the Wahoo logo because what for? It's minimal at best. And they've said their focus going forward is going to be the Block C logo. That's where their priority lies right now.
Do you think the nickname of the Indians is in jeopardy because now the people that were against the logo are now focusing on the Indians nickname, even though it is was created to honor Louis Sock-Alexis, who was the first Native American to play Major League Baseball. Is that next to go, do you think?
Absolutely. And if you recall back to last opening day, these protesters were out there, and they're on record as saying, we're going to take your, they call it a mascot. It's not a mascot. It's a logo. They're going to take that from the team. And they said, and then after that's gone, we're coming for the name next. The name is the next thing to go. And the Indians organization released a statement yesterday saying, we're not changing the name. That is not changing. But you know what? They've also kind of double spoke on the Chief Wahoo logo in the past few years. We're not going to get rid of it. We're just going to kind of make it our secondary, and then eventually it was gone. So I have no faith and no trust in the Dolan ownership and what they say, because everything they have basically told the fans, they've gone against and they look like hypocrites for. As a fan, people should be very aware of that the team is not playing to the fan base. They're doing this to appease the Major League Baseball commissioner, and that's it.
And the commissioner, I know, has had a lot of radical ideas. I mean, certainly doing away with intentional walks, yet, the pace of play continues on. And some of the things that I look at, I say, what is the commissioner doing to bring more youth into the game, say youth participation? It doesn't seem like a whole lot. There's ideas on improving pace of play certainly have not worked so far. For that matter, what I'd like to see is a World Series where we don't have the threat of snow. I kind of believe in that as well. I think that the World Series goes on a little too long in baseball, and for that matter, I don't necessarily like a playoff in which a 83 victory team can be called a world champion. But we're talking to Steve Peters, formerly of the Beating Drum radio show, but he's a podcaster, very eloquent and very thought-provoking, and has done a whole lot of stuff about the defense of Native American imagery in sports and such. This weekend, the Atlanta Braves, they came out with a new mascot. I don't know if you saw this, named Blooper. And to me, this was, and to a lot of people, they just did not like this. It seemed to be a takeoff on the Philly Fanatic, but there was nothing involved about the nickname of the mascot. It was, in a way to be very politically correct to have a mascot, to go away from, let's say, what the Braves used to have, which was Chief Nakahoma and such. What were your thoughts on Blooper?
I think it's just it's a deflection. It's like, hey, look over here so you don't see what we're doing over here. They want to draw attention away from the name because they know that they could potentially be the next in line. Maybe not exactly the next team to be pegged, because as we're seeing of this morning, all these mascot groups are now calling on Dan Snyder to turn over the Redskins and do away with that. And I hope that Dan Snyder holds firm to his word. And we have some contacts with the Redskins that we're actually talking to right now, trying to get some inside information. But, that's what it is. It's a deflection. Hey, look at this. We just created this new mascot that has nothing to do with the team name or the history. We want you to pay attention to this so that our name does not come under fire. And the Atlanta Braves have already compromised. They've already given up the screaming Indian head. They took, from what I heard, they took the tomahawk off of some of the jerseys, but not all the way. Yeah. So they stopped the fans from doing the tomahawk chop. So the Braves have compromised more than enough. And at what point does this end? Because there is no firm line in the sand drawn anymore where you say, okay, here's the line. We're not going to go past this anymore. It's now like this malleable, wavy line where the protesters get whatever they want, and the fans who pay good money and devote their time and energy to this are getting the shaft.
Well, Well, the where it ends is that you actually change history. You don't have a humorous or a friendly baseball logo that I think actually was probably very important to keeping the Indians in town for their dark days of history, and I'll explain that later on in the show. But it was commissioned by the person who broke the color barrier in the American League. The artist who passed away in December, who commissioned it, Walter Goldbach, always said, "Look, there's no racial, nothing about that. We wanted a friendly, engaging caricature, a very unique logo that worked certainly quite well for them."
And you know what I find to be so reprehensible about the Indians organization. And I mentioned this yesterday when I was talking with on my video. Walter Goldbach created that Chief Wahoo logo 71 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
They've had it for 71 years, and that, you're right, that basically kept this team afloat during the darkest years because it kept people coming to the stadiums, it kept merch going. So for 70 years, the Indians have profited off of this man's artwork. He passes away in December, and not one peep from the Indians organization about his passing.
That is a great point.
There was not we're sorry to hear about his passing. Nothing. It gets me really choked up. I'm really getting kind of emotional because I find that to be so disrespectful to this man who did nothing but give you a piece of his artistic talent. You profit off of it, and when he dies, you can't even say we're sorry to hear about his passing. And I reached out to the Indians through a couple social media sites. They read my messages and never responded. Not one peep from them.
I know that I've actually written by Commissioner Manfred and Paul Dolan myself, never heard back from him. What really bothers me, I think, in this is that the people that are happiest about this are people like Craig Calcaterra of NBCSports.com, baseball writer. He's the guy that tweeted out back in April his dismay that the Braves had unfurled a large American flag at SunTrust Park as part of the opening ceremonies of the ballpark. And I mean, that's the guy that you're appeasing. Is this healthy for, is this healthy? Or is this a witch hunt or a demonization? I guess we can hope in the future that maybe after the All-Star game and maybe after some things blow over, that you'll have that retro day where you bring back old uniforms. And since it has been for a long time very iconic, that you can have a logo and that people will then start to say, you know what, there isn't hate in this. Quit trying to tell me what I think, which to me is far more offensive than anything that people are trying to say about nicknames, logos, what have you. Anyway, I've got to take a break. Steve Peters, it's always wonderful to talk to you. We'll do this again. Tri-City Sports Now. I've got Vol news. I've got the Titans have 2 new coordinators. And, of course, Steve Forbes and Johnny Lynch coming up in the next hour. Tri-City Sports Now.
Crabtree Buick GMC. It means trust.
All right.
60 years.